This is Mac OS Ken.
Foldable iPhone talk flares up, news and a question around iPhone 16e, and His Majesty the King spins the hits. It is Friday, the 7th of March, 2025. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken. Brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by Factor. Meals that are smart and delicious. Get 50% off your first box plus free shipping with code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/MacOSCan. I would rather eat bees than talk about an iPhone that may or may not exist, and if it does, will not hit until late 2026 at the earliest. Sadly, it's cold and rainy outside, and I can't find any bees. TF International analyst Ming-Chi posted thoughts on Apple and foldable iPhones online on Thursday, and God bless him, he didn't go to the hell site to do it. Young MC hit Medium with thoughts on how Apple will position such a device, what it might cost, what it might look like, how many Apple will ship, and when. What's the point? Surprise! It's AI. Are there really no bees anywhere today? Really? According to the analyst, multimodal functionality and cross-app integration are the trends in AI device use cases. Larger screens enhance the AI experience, enabling scenarios like chatting with a chatbot about travel plans while viewing a full map app simultaneously. It's expected to retail above $2,000 and $2,500. Sounds pricey, but the analyst says iPhone status is a must-have device, and Apple's loyal fan base will generate strong replacement demand, provided quality meets expectations. It'll bring back Touch ID, because there will not be room for Face ID. And it won't fold like a flip phone, according to Ming-Chi It'll fold like a book. According to the analyst, Apple's expecting to have the design nailed down between now and the end of June of this year. The project will kick off officially, and no doubt secretly, by the end of September of this year, with mass production set to begin in the fourth quarter of next year. Apple's second-generation foldable will hit mass production in the second half of 2027. By the end of next year, the analyst thinks Apple will have sold between 3 million and 5 million foldable iPhones. That number could reach 20 million, that's a quote, could reach 20 million units in 2027. My kingdom for a bee. I'm not saying he's wrong. I could be wrong. I would be happy to be wrong about this, especially if a foldable iPhone proved to be anything more than a novelty. But I'm not feeling it. For 4 of the past 5 years, I've had one question around the idea of a foldable iPhone. What's the point? What problem does it solve? Would it be cool? Maybe, though to me at least, it introduces levels of complexity that so far the most valuable company on the planet has not felt the need to embrace. And I would ask people, what's the point? It wasn't until the middle of 2024, during a conversation with creative strategy CEO Ben Beharin, that I finally got an answer that made sense to me. China. He said the reason Apple would or will make a foldable iPhone is because consumers in China love them. And though I personally don't see the need, I felt like I understood Apple's need. That lasted for about 6 months. Then this past January, Anthony Scarcella, research director for client devices at market tracker IDC, was quoted as saying, "Despite the continued growth across several regions, we have seen a decreased demand for foldables in the market, despite intensified promotions and marketing. Vendors have started shifting R&D away from foldables as consumer interest remains flat." Could a foldable iPhone turn that beat around, increase interest and demand for foldables? Yeah, maybe. The thing is, though, people thought Apple would make a foldable iPhone because it was what people wanted, specifically what people in China wanted. If they're getting bored, what's the point? Which brings me back to my original question, what's the point? But I know, we all know that Apple is going to make a foldable iPhone. Just like we all know that Apple is going to put a car on the road and is going to make a full-on Apple TV. Wait a second, what? When did that happen? Remember the iFixit story from earlier this week? The one that had the self-repair people giving iPhone 16e a reparability rating of 7 out of 10? Turns out there's more to that story. According to a piece from Forbes, iFixit found that Apple's entry-level iPhone has no parts pairing. The piece says the iFixit teardown confirmed that components can be swapped between different iPhone 16e models without losing software features. In one generation, says the report, Apple has gone from some of the worst and stifling repair practices on the market to setting industry examples. The question now is whether that will carry over to Apple's higher-end phones. The same electrically released battery adhesive found in the whole of the iPhone 16 line feels like a given. The way Forbes sees it, the battery tech plus the more repair-friendly iPhone 16e bode well for the iPhone 17 line. Interesting numbers this week from Consumer Intelligence Research Partners, or CIRP, tied to iPhone 16e. The headline of their report asks a question and answers it. Who is going to buy an iPhone 16e? Probably not iPhone SE owners. If Apple had simply updated iPhone SE, the firm thinks anticipating sales of the new device would be a cinch. But raising the price $170 kind of puts a kink in that. According to CIRP, the iPhone SE appealed to Android switchers, first-time smartphone owners, and especially to existing SE owners. Overall, it appears iPhone SE buyers stayed with a low-price, minimum-feature phone rather than upgrading from an iPhone SE to more expensive models. For 2024, by their count, 2% of people who bought an iPhone SE were buying their first cell phone of any kind. 7% were trading up from a basic phone. 19% were switching from Android. 26% were upgrading from another iPhone SE. And 45% were moving from one of Apple's higher numbered iPhones over or down to an SE. While they'd probably rather pay $429 again, one imagines that Apple will be able to keep the iPhone SE buyers who traded over or down from a numbered iPhone. You gotta figure they're locked in. That's me talking, not CIRP. What CIRP says is the iPhone SE buyers who seem to be attracted to the aggressive $429 price do not appear to be a ready market for the new $599 iPhone 16e. It's not clear what the relatively small base of iPhone SE owners will do when they need to replace their current phones. Of course, that doesn't take third-party sale prices and subsidies into account. Again, though, that's me talking, not CIRP. Maybe I should do a funny voice for them. More news in a moment, but first a word from today's sponsor, Factor, helping you optimize your nutrition. Looking for a meal that meets your dietary goals and tastes great at the same time? Then you are looking for Factor. Their chef-made, dietitian-approved meals come to your door fully prepared, just waiting for your microwave and your plate. And they are delicious. The chicken and the white cheddar chicken and broccoli grits was fantastic. In fact, all of the meats that I've had from Factor have been, as are the sides. I make green beans myself every now and then, but the green beans that came with that meal, they had sliced almonds, red pepper flakes, some kind of smoky flavor. They knocked mine out of the park. And that's just one of the great meals I've had. With about 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored to your taste and your goals. So get to it. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code factorpodcast to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code factorpodcast, all one word. Factor Podcast at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Apple's been ordered to open iOS to third-party providers in another region. After a relatively speedy trial late last year, a piece from 9to5Mac says Brazil has given the company 90 days to open up the iOS ecosystem to third-party apps in Brazil, just like the company did in the EU. And finally today, what do the Sex Pistols song God Save the Queen and the Elton John song Goodbye England's Rose have in common? Neither is likely to be featured on a new playlist from the King of England. Because there is a new playlist from the King of England, and you can hear it on Monday. Mac Rumors says King Charles III will be releasing an Apple Music playlist next Monday, which is Commonwealth Day in the UK. Fittingly, the King's playlist will feature songs from artists hailing from Commonwealth countries such as Bob Marley, Kylie Minogue, and Grace Jones. They're the artists, not the countries. See, if I were king and my name were Charles, I'd just play the theme to Charles in Charge for an hour. Actually, I'd play it all day, every day, make it my country's national anthem, a whole nation driven mad humming the theme song of a show that most of them have neither seen nor heard of. Anyway, Mac Rumors says the playlist will premiere 6 a.m. UK time on Monday. It'll be replayed several times Monday and Tuesday on the Apple Music radio stations, Apple Music One, and Apple Music Hits. And of course, it will be free to play on demand for Apple Music subscribers. This week on the checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac, we'll go deeper into the child protection changes for apps and developers announced by Apple last week. Plus, another case of cyberattacks being sent through the physical mail. Does that work? Tune in and find out. You're looking for checklist number 414. You can find it today at securemac.com/checklist or wherever you get podcasts. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by Factor. Get 50% off your first box plus free shipping with code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macosken. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
If you have any questions or concerns, please find our lead salesman, Charles.
Is there anything we should know about him?
He is in charge.